Let's talk a little bit about ideas to prevent gun violence. That clip showed some hope that the elections may turn a bit of a spotlight on the issue. David King, what's your take?
Well, it's interesting with the Hillary Clinton clip that we just saw. We need to remember that she's playing to a primary audience, a primary constituency, and they're certainly not going to be pro-gun. The very interesting element from that clip was the role of the National Rifle Association. We talk about them as that they are this 800-pound gorilla. It's false, right? They're basically a 1,200-pound gorilla. They are massive. And their spending and their reach is quite remarkable. But like with all interest groups and lobbying groups, they play in a competitive environment. And 2 years ago, it was absolutely fascinating to watch in the state of Colorado, a group that just kind of emerged to begin the recall petition for a couple of state legislators. It was called Rocky Mountain Gun Owners. Fabulous and very, very interesting group that positioned itself to the right side of the NRA. The NRA was kind of caught off guard, and Rocky Mountain Gun Owners made huge headway. NRA then stiffened their position within Colorado and has tried to muscle Rocky Mountain Gun Owners out. So if you go to rmgo.org, it's really interesting because they say right at the very top, Colorado's only no compromise gun group. Every lobbying organization, every interest group is in a competitive environment, and they're always worried about where their next paycheck is going to come from. They cannot show a moment of weakness and compromise. So the NRA is not going to shift and not going to change. The hope at the federal level, I think, is probably going to come more through the courts. And I have more hope at the state and local level, where we have citizen activists like you, understanding the community, reaching out and trying to build on those very basic laws that absolutely can be built on. This is not going to change all at once from Washington, D.C. It's going to change in the 36,000 towns, townships, and municipalities in this country, in the 3,033 counties in this country. It's going to happen at the local level and then possibly bubble up. So the campaign is kind of fun to watch right now. We're going to hear about gun control for probably into midsummer, but once we get into general election season, I don't think we're going to hear about it very much at the national stage, and that's when you really have to get busy locally.
Okay. And on that front, Mike, what do we see happening on the local and state level?
Sure, yeah. So I think after Newtown, everybody saw the paralysis in Congress, and we saw that a universal background check bill couldn't even make it through a democratically controlled Senate. And I think a lot of people found that the narrative was, well, nothing's happening on this issue if it's not happening in Congress. But actually, at the state level, there's been quite a bit going on since Newtown, so since 2012. One of the things we've tracked is that there have been 125 significant gun safety reforms enacted since then in 41 different states. So not just in the states that you would expect, not just the usual suspects. And in particular, several states right after Newtown enacted comprehensive reform. So we're talking about New York, Connecticut, and Colorado significantly, a purple state, enacted reforms including universal background checks and a prohibition on large capacity ammunition magazines. So at the state level, there has been some progress. And in particular, if you look at universal background checks, since the Sandy Hook shooting, 8 different states have enacted universal background checks, bringing the total up to 18. So a lot of activity there. And one really interesting development was that in Washington in 2014, that was achieved using a ballot initiative. And so it was actually voters directly being asked, do you want this policy in place? And this really confirmed what we've been saying is true, is that polling numbers show that something like 90% of Americans support universal background checks. And so when we took this directly to the people in Washington, this policy passed by a wide margin. So I think the gun violence prevention movement is finding strategies at the state and local level to be more effective. I think it's worth noting that at the local level, there's a lot of problems right now with what are called preemption laws. Only 8 states don't have really strong preemption laws. So there's only a handful of states where local governments can really even get involved in this issue in the first place. And I think that was very much by design, and the gun lobby lobbied many states to enact strong preemption laws. So that's something that people should know about and is a bar to local governments taking action where they otherwise would. And in some states, if they try to take action, there's actually punitive damages that can be brought against the government officials that are voting for those policies. So that's something to be concerned about. But overall, there is a lot of of progress at the state level, and in the courts on the Second Amendment side, we've been tracking cases since 2008. That was when the Supreme Court first identified this individual right to bear arms. There has been lots of litigation challenging all kinds of gun control legislation across the board. I've now tracked over 1,000 decisions since then, and in 94% of the cases, the Second Amendment claim is rejected. So really, the courts are almost across the board saying, unless a law is extremely, extremely strict, like a prohibition on handguns in the home, like we saw in DC, that was the 2008 case, these laws will stand. And the courts find that they're reasonably related to protecting public safety. So everything from background checks to prohibitions on certain dangerous weaponry, those are being upheld by the courts. So to say that all gun control laws violate the Second Amendment is just not true, and we're really trying to get that message out that these laws do not violate the Second Amendment.